artist as a young Manee. We are taking the legendary, revolutionary, and notoriously dense literature of James Joyce, specifically his semi-autobiographical novel, A Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man, and his final ultimate puzzle, Finnegans Wake.
Right.
And we are crashing it head-on into the chaotic, psychedelic, outsider art universe of Five Starcle Men.
Now, before we go any further, we really need to establish a baseline for you listening right now.
Yeah, good call.
We're operating under the assumption that you are already familiar with the foundational lore of Five Starcle Men.
Right, we're not doing the whole backstory today.
Exactly. We're assuming you know who Luke and Glenn are. You know about their high school origins in Lancaster, California.
The cassette releases, the atonal music, the heavy drug use, all that.
Yeah. We aren't here to just recount their biography or, read you a Wikipedia page. Today we are really elevating their story.
Putting it under a very specific literary and psychological microscope.
Exactly. We're going to examine how the trajectory of Luke and Glenn mirrors the protagonist of Joyce's portrait, Stephen Douglas.
Yes.
And then we're going to see how Five Starcle Men's later sprawling, deeply paranoid lore aligns almost perfectly with the impenetrable, cosmic, cyclical madness of Finnegans Wake.
Because when you lay these source texts side by side, a core, incredibly urgent question just emerges from the muddy waters.
And what is that?
How does an artist, when they become utterly alienated from the reality they were born into, build an entirely new universe just to survive?
It's a question of absolute survival.
Right. So let's unpack this from the very beginning. We have to start with the roots of this alienation.
Because nobody just wakes up one day and decides to completely sever ties with reality.
There's a process.
There's always a process. How does the environment reject the artist? And in turn, how does the artist reject the environment?
Let's look at Joyce first. How does A Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man set up this dynamic? Well, what's fascinating here is how Joyce grounds Stephen Dedalus' earliest memories in these intense, immediate, and unifying sensory experiences.
Oh yeah, the book starts right in the senses.
The source text opens with a famous story his father tells him. It goes, "Once upon a time, in a very good time, there was a moo cow coming down along the road."
Like the moo cow story.
But Joyce doesn't just give us the words of the story, he immerses us in the physical reality surrounding the child hearing it.
Yeah, it's not just a detached narrative.
Not at all. The text details Stephen remembering his neighbor, Betty Burns, selling lemon plaque.
And the smells, right?
Yes. It notes the specific, odd smell of the oil sheet his mother puts on his bed. The text explicitly notes Stephen's realization that when you wet the bed first, it is warm, then it gets cold.
That is so deeply grounded.
He is deeply, almost helplessly embedded in his family and his physical senses. There is literally no separation between his internal mind and his external environment.
He's connected. He is woven directly into the fabric of his reality. He belongs there.
Precisely. But as Stephen grows up and enters the institutional world, that fabric violently tears.
That is a harsh transition.
It is. The world rapidly shifts from a place of sensory wonder into what the text explicitly calls a vision of squalor and insincerity.
Squalor.
The pivotal rupture happens when he's sent away to his Catholic boarding school, Clongowes Wood College.
Right. This is the moment where the real world breaks its contract with him.
Exactly. Stephen's glasses are broken by accident on the cinder path by another student.
So he can't see. He's totally vulnerable.
He literally cannot see. But the prefect of studies, this authority figure named Father Dolan, refuses to believe it was an accident.
Oh, man.
He brutally beats Stephen's hands with a panty bat. He calls him a lazy, idle little loafer and a schemer.
Think about the psychological impact of that on a child. It's a profound institutional betrayal.
Completely. The authority figure, the representative of adult reality, punishes him for a crime he didn't commit in a reality he didn't even construct.
And that injustice fundamentally alters his relationship with the world.
It has to, right?
Yeah. The text tells us that after this, the noise of children at play begins to actively annoy him. Their silly voices make him feel that he is completely different from others.
He realizes that the given world is arbitrary, it's cruel, and ultimately it's completely insufficient for his soul.
There's this one quote from the text that just punches you in the gut.
Which one?
It perfectly captures this transition from an innocent child to a totally alienated observer. After seeing his father drinking and carousing with his cronies in Cork, Stephen feels an absolute chasm open up between him and normal society.
Right.
The source says, his mind seemed older than theirs. It shone coldly on their strifes and happiness and regrets like a moon upon a younger earth.
Wow.
And it goes on. Nothing stirred within his soul but a cold and cruel and loveless lust. His childhood was dead or lost. And he was drifting in midlife like the barren shell of the moon.
The barren shell of the moon. It's the ultimate statement of profound, irreversible detachment.
He is no longer on the earth with them. He's orbiting it, cold and dead.
Now, I want you to hold that image of the alienated young man in your mind. The kid totally disconnected from his peers, staring coldly down at a squalid world.
Okay, I have it.
Because here's where it gets really interesting. Let's draw the parallel to the prehistory of 5 Starcle men.
Oh, this is going to be good. Let's look at Luke and Glenn.
The timeline in our source texts notes that they start out connected, just like Stephen Dedalus with his Mook House story.
Right, they were paper airplane buddies in the 5th grade.
It's a very innocent, typical childhood connection. They are embedded in their environment.
But then high school hits, and their environment starts failing them, much like Klongo's wood failed Stephen.
The text notes that Luke's band, Blot, breaks up because the drummer is using speed.
So the conventional avenues of teenage expression, playing in a rock band, participating in the local music scene, they're all falling apart around him due to the squalor of substance abuse.
And during this period of disillusionment, Luke and Glenn reconnect over the phone. They discover a shared interest in psychedelics and music that steps way outside the boundaries of normal rock and roll.
The text describes their early jam sessions as atonal and arrhythmic, maybe only conceptually interesting.
They are already rejecting the norms of music, but the real rupture, the broken glasses moment for 5 Starcle men, happens at a punk rock house party in Lancaster.
This is the moment they become the barren shell of the moon.
Exactly. According to the timeline, they go to this party and consume a massive amount of Robitussin.
Right, a cough there.
But instead of engaging with the party, instead of participating in the typical teenage rebellion, the drinking, the socializing taking place inside the house, Luke completely removes himself.
He walks out.
He literally leaves the squalor of the party, goes into the front yard for fresh air, and looks up at the night sky.
He stares at the twinkling stars.
And in that moment of total detachment from the social reality inside the house, the name of the band comes to him. He writes down 5 Starcle men, which later morphs into Starcle.
But wait, let me stop you right there.
Okay, go ahead.
I have to play devil's advocate for a second because this comparison is starting to feel a little stretched. And I know you listening right now might be thinking the exact same thing.
Fair enough. What's the stretch?
Well, you've got James Joyce, one of the most educated, deliberate literary architects in human history. He's studying theology and meticulously constructing an intellectual aesthetic theory over years.
Right.
And on the other side, you have 2 teenagers in Lancaster, California, taking massive doses of cough syrup and acid in a suburban front yard.
I see where you're going with this.
I mean, Stephen uses his massive intellect to build a wall between himself and Irish society. Are Luke and Glenn really doing the same thing?
Or are they just experiencing a chemical breakdown?
Yeah. Are we romanticizing a drug trip by comparing it to a literary masterpiece?
That is a completely fair question, and it's exactly the trap conventional criticism falls into.
Okay, lay it out for me.
It's easy to look at the surface, the high culture of a novel versus the low culture of a cough syrup trip, and just assume they're totally unrelated.
Right, that's the natural instinct.
But if we look at the psychological utility, the mechanism underneath, they are identical.
Okay, defend that for me. How is the utility identical?
Both the intellect and the hallucinogens are being used as tools to build an impenetrable wall. Stephen Dedalus uses Latin, scholastic philosophy, and a devastatingly cold demeanor to isolate himself. Luke and Glenn use dissociative hallucinogens, a tonal noise, and esoteric lore.
So one uses intellectualism, and the other uses intoxication.
But both are survival strategies. Both are desperate attempts to create a barrier against a world they feel completely alienated from. A world that demands conformity they just cannot provide.
So it's not about how you build the fortress, it's about the fact that you need a fortress in the first place.
Exactly, because both Stephen and the FSM founders reach the exact same conclusion about reality.
What's that?
The text says Stephen experiences a lust of wandering and a deep desire to encounter an unsubstantial image in the real world.
He wanted to meet something beyond the mundane.
Something that transcended the squalor, yes. And Luke and Glenn, staring up at the stars in Lancaster, completely detached from the punk party behind them, are looking for that exact same unsubstantial image.
They both realized that the world they were handed, whether it's turn of the century Dublin or 1990s suburban California, is completely insufficient.
It cannot hold them, so they have absolutely no choice but to create a new one.
Which brings us to the next logical step in this journey.
Right. If you decide to reject reality and build your own fortress, what do the walls look like?
What are the physical laws of this new universe?
We are transitioning from why they left reality to how they built their art. Let's talk about forging an aesthetic.
To understand this, we really need to unpack Stephen Dedalus' aesthetic theory. He explains it in a highly dense philosophical conversation with his friend Lynch in Portrait.
It's a very complex theory.
It is, but it hinges on one primary argument. Stephen claims that true art must be what he calls static.
Okay, let's break down static in this context, because he doesn't mean it's just standing still like a statue or a painting, right?
No, it's not about physical motion at all. It is entirely about the emotional and psychological response the art provokes in the audience.
Okay.
Stephen argues that improper art is kinetic. It excites either desire or loathing in the person viewing it.
Give me an example of kinetic art so we can picture this.
Sure. As the text puts it, desire urges us to possess, to go to something. Loathing urges us to abandon, to go from something.
Got it.
So if a piece of art makes you want to buy something or sleep with someone or eat something, it is exciting desire. Stephen calls this pornographical art.
On the flip side,
If a piece of art makes you want to protest or feel disgust or run away, it is exciting loathing. He calls this didactic art.
both are kinetic.
Both try to move you, to force you into a physical or emotional action.
So almost all mainstream entertainment is kinetic. Pop music makes you want to dance or cry. Action movies make your heart race. Political art makes you angry.
Right. And Stephen is rejecting all of that completely. He says that true art, the true aesthetic emotion, is static. It arrests the mind. It completely stops the internal machinery of wanting or hating.
It raises the mind above human desire and loathing entirely.
It just is.
Yes. And Stephen's ultimate goal for the artist who creates this static art is practically divine.
What does he say?
He says the artist, like the god of creation, remains within or behind or beyond or above his handiwork, invisible, refined out of existence, indifferent, paring his fingernails.
Indifferent, paring his fingernails. It's such a chilling, powerful image.
It really is. The creator is completely detached from what they've made and completely indifferent to how you feel about it.
Now, keeping that image of the indifferent creator in mind, let's look at how Luke and Glenn's art perfectly mirrors this philosophy.
Because 5 Starcle men are absolutely not trying to make you dance, and they aren't trying to make you cry.
They are aggressively rejecting the kinetic norms of music.
Aggressively. The source text describes their music, specifically the Reject Board cassette, as an extremely twisted, hallucinatory mix of samples, loops, detuned guitars, cough syrup chants, alien transmissions, and other weirdness.
Think about that description. It is atonal. It is arrhythmic.
It refuses to engage with the listener's desire for a catchy melody, and it refuses to engage with their loathing of dissonance.
If you try to consume their music looking for an emotional catharsis, you will be violently rebuffed.
Exactly. It arrests the mind by completely disorienting it. It forces you into a state of stasis because you literally don't know how to react.
And we can see this exact philosophy, this pursuit of total indifference, reflected in the core lore of 5 Starcle men.
Specifically, the Starcle-Manee paradigm.
This is where the world building truly aligns with Joyce. The text describes the Starcle-Manee as fifth-dimensional aliens.
Right.
And there's a crucial line from the database that explains their perspective. It says, only able to attempt like the rest of us, they see the good in all, but there is no good or bad, so instead they are.
There is no good or bad, so instead they are. That line blows my mind every time I read it.
It's incredible.
Because that is exactly Stephen Dedalus' static art. It strips away human morality. It doesn't urge desire. It doesn't urge loathing.
It transcends the binary of good and bad entirely.
It simply is. It's pure existence without judgment.
It is an attempt to channel a perspective that is completely outside the human experience. It is the ultimate manifestation of the artist paring his fingernails.
And you see this in their visual aesthetic as well. Think about the Starcle symbol itself.
Right, the symbol Luke drew in his high school art class.
The text notes that his first attempt was just a messed up attempt to draw a typical star.
but the lore doesn't treat it as a mistake.
Not at all. The text speculates that the symbol is actually a profane, immanent, transcendent alien structure imposed on his brain.
They're literally trying to physically manifest this static alien indifference into the real world.
You see it in the 80 pages of disorienting collages they made for the Big Plan book. You see it in the Starcle wooden cutouts. These giant, jagged, painted wooden stars with the infinity symbol inside a circle.
They aren't trying to paint a pretty landscape to sell you. They're trying to drag a fifth-dimensional, indifferent reality down into a third-dimensional space.
And this kind of ambition requires a massive fundamental shift in how the artist views their place in the cosmos.
There is a fascinating parallel in self-location here. Let's look at how both artists orient themselves in space.
I love this part.
Early in Portrait, there is a scene where the young Stephen Dedalus writes his name in the flyleaf of his geography book.
He writes his full address, basically.
Yeah, he writes Stephen Dedalus, Class of Elements, Clongowes Wood College, Sallins, County Kildare, Ireland, Europe, the world, the universe.
He scales himself up. He starts at a tiny desk in a tiny classroom, and he zooms out until he encompasses the entire cosmos.
He is physically grounding himself, yes, but he is also recognizing his microscopic place in a vast, terrifying universe.
He is connecting his individual existence directly to the cosmic scale.
Now, look at how Luke and Glenn scale their universe. They do the exact same thing, but they do it interdimensionally.
Yes. They aren't just two kids living on Fallbrook Court in Colorado Springs or hanging out in the desert in Lancaster.
Their self-location explodes outward.
The FSM text connects them directly to Blightfor Lambers and alien liver stambles of the Starcle Manee aliens.
They are writing deep, intricate lore about characters like Rocket Boy.
Right, an interdimensional traveler from the planet Dezo who was caught in a freak radiation storm.
They are mapping a geography that doesn't exist on Earth. They are charting the universe just like Stephen did, but they are doing it in the fifth dimension.
But this ambition brings us to a massive roadblock.
Always a roadblock.
If you have fundamentally rejected the reality of your environment and you have formulated a completely new static aesthetic theory based on an indifferent fifth dimensional perspective, you suddenly run into a terrifying limitation.
The limitation of language.
Exactly. The words we are using right now, English.
Normal, everyday language is a product of the very reality the artist is trying to escape.
English is built on human assumptions. It is built on the morals, the desires, the loathings, the squalor and insincerity of the world they left behind.
If your aesthetic goal is total alien indifference, how do you express a fifth dimensional thought in a third dimensional language?
The answer is you can't.
The language cannot contain the new universe.
You have to break the language. And this transitions us from the structured philosophical rebellion of Portrait of the Artist to the absolute unbridled chaos of Finnegans Wake.
And chaos is the right word, because Finnegans Wake is widely considered the most complex, impenetrable piece of literature ever published in the English language.
But though calling it English is a huge stretch.
It's essentially a new language entirely.
It is. The language Joyce invented for the Wake is described within the text itself as sordomutics, florlingua, shuttlefogel.
Let's decode that for a second. Sordomutics.
Think about the roots. Sordo relates to deaf, and mutix relates to mute.
It implies a language of the deaf and mute.
It is a language that cannot be spoken in the real world, and cannot be heard by normal ears.
It is an auxiliary neutral idiom. Joyce blends dozens, maybe hundreds of languages together.
He utilizes relentless puns, portmanteaus, and constantly shifting syntax.
It's not a book you read. It's a code you have to actively decipher.
It forces the reader to stop and decode every single syllable. It's the language of the night, the language of the sleeping, dreaming mind, where linear logic just doesn't exist.
Now, to give you a visceral sense of this linguistic overwhelming, I want you to read aloud just one word from the source text.
Oh boy.
This is one of Joyce's famous 100-letter thunder words. It represents the sound of the thunderclap that triggers the fall of man. Are you ready for this?
I'm bracing myself. Okay, here we go.
Good luck.
Babadalgar, Taganer, Naronkan, Brontener, Dash, Rin Unfervaruan, Skan, Tuhu, Hurdenenter, Dash, Nook.
It's like a sonic assault on the brain.
It is an absolute assault. You cannot skim that word. It forces you to stop.
And when you hear that sonic barrage, and then you look at what 5 Starcle men were putting out into the world, the hairs on your arms stand up.
Because FSM realized the exact same linguistic limitation that Joyce did, and they responded in the exact same way.
Compare Joyce's thunder word to how Glenn was communicating with the outside world.
Right.
The source text gives us a truly unsettling account from an interviewer for a zine called Whoop.
Oh, this story is wild.
This interviewer was trying to do a standard piece, trying to track Glenn down to ask him questions about the music. And how does Glenn respond to this request for normal communication?
He doesn't write a letter, he leaves a series of answering machine messages.
And the text describes these messages as more disturbing than decipherable.
They consisted of a brief introduction, a threat, and then a lengthy round of gurgling and chanting.
Gurgling and chanting. He has literally abandoned words.
When a representative of the normal world tries to make contact, Glenn responds with stortomutics.
He responds with the language of the deaf and mute.
And even when FSM does write things down, it is just as fractured and punishing as Joyce's prose.
The FSM database mentions something called psychic braille.
Psychic braille.
It's a method of communication that bypasses normal sight and sound. The text is full of these dense, impenetrable phrases.
Give us an example.
Here is one quote. Space Ilma, I have been atropatized, and it's been till late now, and I will fight the kill with my water snarge, again transform me into a fucking flavalican or clawlylak splat forth into Nilo comedy.
Levelogin! Qualilak.
Water snarge. Just like Joyce's thunderwords have shifting, nested meanings that require a decoder ring, Glenn's language is, as the text said, more disturbing than decipherable.
It's a proprietary code that only makes sense within the strict parameters of his specific delusion.
So this brings up a massive philosophical question, and I want you to really think about this.
Okay.
At what point does language stop being a tool for communication and become a fortress?
Are Joyce's multilingual esoteric puns and Finnegans' wake and Glenn's alien gurgles on a cassette tape actually the exact same defense mechanism?
Are they both just building a linguistic moat around themselves?
This challenges our fundamental assumption about the purpose of art. Usually we think of art as a bridge.
Right. I feel a sadness, I paint a picture of that sadness, you look at the painting, and you feel a connection to my sadness.
The gap between our minds is bridged. Art as empathy.
But in the case of Finnegans Wake and Five Starcle Men, the art functions as a wall.
It says to the audience, you cannot reach me here, you cannot understand me.
Unless you are willing to completely abandon your own reality, your own language, and submit entirely to my rules, you cannot enter.
It's almost hostile. It's a test of devotion.
It is incredibly hostile, and the psychological implication of that is profound.
Because if you successfully build a universe that only you understand, and you speak a language that only you know, what happens to your sense of self?
If you are the sole architect, the sole linguist, and the sole resident of reality, your ego has no competition.
It inflates to fill the entire space. You become a god. Inevitably.
Which brings us to the next phase of this journey. Delusions of grandeur.
We need to talk about Here Comes Everybody and the Starcle minis.
In Finnegans Wake, this massive inflation of the ego is centered around the book's main figure, Humphrey Chimpton Earwicker, or HCE.
Now, in the waking reality of the book, to the extent that a waking reality even exists in the wake, HCE is no be special.
He is merely a tavern keeper in the Dublin suburb of Chapelizod. He's an ordinary, flawed, middle-aged man.
But in the dream language of the book, he isn't a pub owner. He is Here Comes Everybody.
Exactly. His initials, HCE, are used throughout the text to signify that he is the universal man.
The text elevates him to a mythic, omnipresent giant.
His physical body actually forms the literal landscape of the city itself.
The text says, his head at the knockout in the park, and his feet are at the other end of the city.
He is the archetypal father of all men, the builder of cities, the mountain itself.
He is a literal giant. But there's a catch.
Yeah, a massive catch. Despite this cosmic geographical grandeur, HCE is constantly plagued by intense paranoia.
He spends the entire book endlessly defending himself against a vague, shifting rumor of some sexual impropriety he may or may not have committed in Phoenix Park.
So, he is simultaneously a divine giant who IS the physical earth, and a paranoid pub owner terrified of local gossip.
He is everything, and he is a terrified nobody.
Now, I want you to hold that duality in your mind. The cosmic giant and the paranoid nobody.
Because Glenn's descent into his interdimensional delusions maps onto this paradox perfectly.
But in Glenn's case, it isn't a literary device. It is heartbreakingly real and utterly terrifying.
The FSM source texts detail Glenn's rapid and severe decline into mental illness, which is heavily exacerbated by his massive sustained consumption of Robitussin and acid.
He writes a novella called Little Dementia Boy. and the database quotes him expressing this exact same paradox of the cosmic and the mundane.
The text quotes Glenn saying, "I am nothing and that I have been everything."
That is HCE.
It really is. He literally believes he possesses divine world-building power. He says that he made everything and turned into gods again.
But then, and this is the part that just breaks your heart, he claims that he only made himself feel stupid so he could get a normal job and turn himself into an individual person who wished I was famous.
It is a profound textbook delusion of grandeur used to cope with the incredibly painful reality of being a struggling, ordinary person.
Just as Joyce takes a mundane Dublin pub owner and inflates him into the mythic landscape of Ireland, Glenn takes his own life. A kid from Colorado Springs struggling with severe substance abuse and mental health.
And he projects his existence onto a fifth-dimensional intergalactic canvas.
And once that projection happens, every mundane earthly encounter he has is filtered through this cosmic war.
The real world ceases to exist. Everything is lore.
The text details his experiences when he is institutionalized in a mental hospital. He doesn't process it as medical treatment.
The text says he just repeats every 5 seconds, "The aliens did it, the aliens did it." He believes he was holding a gun.
It gets darker. Later, he's put in jail.
The text notes he was jailed because a judge thought he was crazy for claiming to have superpowers.
And while in jail, he is physically assaulted. Someone beats him up.
Now, how does a mind operating in the fifth dimension process that kind of brutal third-dimensional trauma?
He incorporates it into the mythology. He believes the man beat him up because Glenn wouldn't share his superpowers.
And then he claims that aliens came through the roof and killed him because he made me look bad.
Even more tragically, when Glenn attempts suicide, he survives. But in his mind, he didn't just survive a suicide attempt.
He believes that metal-plated Starcle Manees came in between me and the bullets.
This is what we mean by psychological armor. The armor is made of pure lore.
The devastating, mundane reality of incarceration, physical assault, and severe psychiatric distress is completely overwritten by a narrative of cosmic importance.
In his mind, he isn't a victim of the penal system, and he isn't a patient in a psychiatric ward.
He is a crucial, central player in an interdimensional war between humans, blights, and Starcle Manees.
He even incorporates the medical treatments he receives. When they give him psychiatric medication in the hospital, he says the aliens sent a crazy doctor to give him a super-powered mental progress drug.
And he claims this drug warped him to an experimental government research dimension where animals experience your thoughts.
It is the ultimate synthesis of grandeur and suffering.
Both Joyce and FSM take deeply flawed, suffering individuals and inflate them until they encompass the entire universe.
The pain of the mundane becomes monumentally, cosmically significant.
But this leads to a really dizzying realization.
What's that?
If your ego has expanded to take up the entire universe, and you are fighting an endless cosmic war against aliens or rumors, how do you experience time?
Right.
Because once you leave reality, time certainly isn't moving in a straight line anymore. Which brings us to our final point of collision. World history as an alien tape loop.
How these alienated universes handle the concept of history and time is perhaps the most fascinating parallel of all.
Neither Joyce nor Five Starcle men believe in linear progression.
They don't believe in a story that starts at A and ends at Z.
Let's start with Joyce's concept of time in the wake because it's baked into the literal structure of the book.
Joyce built Finnegans Wake around the theories of an 18th century Italian philosopher named Giambattista Vico.
Vico argued against the idea that human history is a straight line of constant progress.
Instead, he proposed that history moves in endless, repeating cycles.
Let's break down those cycles because they are crucial to understanding the loop.
Vico outlined 4 distinct phases. First, the Divine Age, an age of gods and terrifying thunder.
Second, the Heroic Age, an age of aristocrats and mythic conflicts.
Third, the Human Age, an age of democracy, reason, and mundane squalor.
And finally, the Recorso, a period of total collapse and chaos that resets the cycle back to the Divine Age, over and over, forever.
And Joyce didn't just write about this loop. He turned the physical book into a loop.
He did. The source text shows the opening line of Finnegans Wake starting mid-sentence.
It reads, "River run, past Eve and Adams, from swerve of shore to bend of bay, brings us by a commodious vicus of recirculation back to Howth Castle and environs.
And then, if you read all the way to the very last page of this massive book, it ends with an unpunctuated fragment.
Away alone, alas, to loved along the...
Along the what?
Exactly. To finish the sentence, you have to close the book, flip back to page 1, and connect it to the first word.
Along the river run.
The architecture of the book forces you to cycle eternally. There is no end.
It's mind-blowing, and within the text itself, history is just the same conflicts repeating endlessly with different names.
The text mentions the Battle Ares partisans and the Verdans clashing.
It says Uxal, Trixel, crumbling.
Old castles, new castles, true castles, all crumbling down, only to be built again.
History has no beginning and no end. It's just the same archetypes battling over and over in the Recorso.
Okay, now let's apply that commodious vicus of recirculation, that Viconian cycle, to 5 Starcle men.
Because they don't just write about loops, they use literal physical loops to trap you in this exact same reality.
We talked earlier about the reject word cassette.
The source explicitly describes it as a twisted, hallucinatory mix of samples, loops, detuned guitars.
Right, a loop of tape, repeating the same distorted sound over and over, is the sonic equivalent of Vico's cycle.
They are taking fragments of audio and forcing them to repeat endlessly, creating a trap for the ear.
There is no resolution in a tape loop. There is no finale.
And when you look at Glenn's personal history, as he recounts it in his writings, it is an endless tape loop of trauma and rebirth.
He states in the text, "I killed myself once again."
Notice the phrasing. Not, "I tried to kill myself," not, "I killed myself once." Once again.
It is a cycle.
Yeah.
He is trapped in that experimental government research dimension, looping endlessly through different realities.
It maps perfectly onto Vico. Think about Glenn's cycle.
He gets a normal job and feels stupid. That's the human age.
He remembers that he made everything and turns into a god. That's the divine age.
He fights the metal-plated Starcle Manees. That's the heroic age.
He ends up in the mental hospital or jail. That's the Recorso, the collapse into chaos.
And then the cycle begins again. It's a continuous, inescapable cycle of realization and forgetting.
I am nothing, and that I have been everything, over and over.
Even the alien lore they write is cyclical. It's built into the physics of their universe.
One of the texts describing the Starcle Manee aliens says, Nivel traversed the outer perimeter of their sun in a multi-participant star run.
They are literally running in circles around a star. Endless recirculation.
If we look closely at the archival database, there is a fascinating piece of analysis written by a contributor about the fundamental psychological nature of FSM.
The text describes the band's core concept as an exercise in kids being tortured, raped, and controlled by aliens until they became one with those very same aliens.
That is incredibly dark. It's a cycle of abuse where the victim becomes the abuser, the human becomes the alien.
It is deeply dark, but the analysis goes further, and this is where it all ties together.
It defines this state of FSM paranoia as a dialectic, already resolved.
It describes it as a constant hyper-oscillation between globalizing and insulating drives.
I want to linger on that phrase, a constant hyper-oscillation, because that is the exact rhythm of Finnegans' Wake.
It's an endless, oscillating tape loop of expansion and contraction.
On one swing of the pendulum, the ego expands to cover the globe. Here comes everybody, the fifth-dimensional Starcle Manee.
On the other swing, the ego contracts into terrifying insulation. The paranoid pub owner terrified of a rumor. The kid hiding from reality on Robitussin in his front yard.
It breathes in and out forever. It creates a history that is entirely sealed off from the outside world.
Of both Joyce and FSM constructed realities that are hermetically sealed.
You can enter them, you can observe the hyper-oscillation, but they do not point outward to anything but themselves.
They are self-sustaining tape loops.
Okay, wow. Let's take a collective breath here and recap this journey, because we have covered a massive amount of psychological and literary ground. We have been swimming in some incredibly deep, muddy waters.
We truly have.
We started by looking at how the young artists of 5 Starcle Men, much like Joyce's protagonist Stephen Dedalus, felt fundamentally, painfully rejected by their environments.
They retreated from a world of squalor, whether that squalor was the strict, punishing halls of Clongo's Wood College, or a speed-fueled punk party in suburban Lancaster.
They retreated to create an entirely new, indifferent aesthetic. A static art that didn't judge, that didn't urge desire or loathing, that just existed.
Yeah, like a fifth-dimensional Starcle Manees paring their fingernails.
But as they pushed further away from reality to protect themselves, they left the structured intellectual rebellion of portrait and crossed the threshold into the chaotic, looping, polyglottal madness of Finnegans Wake.
Exactly. The fortress became a prison. Ordinary, flawed men became cosmic giants plagued by paranoia.
Language fractured from English into psychic braille, 100-letter thunder words, and answering machine gurgles that were more disturbing than decipherable.
And history itself stopped moving forward, collapsing into an inescapable Viconian tape loop of trauma and rebirth.
So what does this all mean? Why should you, listening to this right now, care about the collision of a canonical Irish novelist and two kids drinking cough syrup in the desert?
Because it demonstrates the incredible and sometimes truly terrifying raw power of the human imagination.
It shows us that when the real world becomes unbearable, whether through institutional oppression, sensory overload, or severe psychiatric distress, the human mind will not just shut down.
It will actively construct a fifth-dimensional reality.
It will invent its own vocabulary, its own mythology, and its own physical laws just to survive the squalor.
The imagination is the ultimate survival mechanism, even if the lifeboat it builds looks like sheer madness from the outside.
Hmm.